Hey there, woodworkers. Today I'm going to start a two-part project. We'll be building a Kubb game and a storage caddy to store that game. Kubb is one of my family's favorite outdoor games to play, and it also is a great project for a beginning woodworker. What I have here is I've got some different pieces of plywood and a dowel, and I'm going to start off by making the storage caddy. I'm using 1/2-inch paint grade birch because it's fairly cheap and inexpensive. And if you're a beginner and making mistakes, then it's not too expensive if you need to use an extra piece. I've got a couple pieces here that are 14 by 16, a couple pieces that are 8 by 24. I've got a piece of 1/4-inch melamine that I'm going to use for the bottom. This is 8 by 16, and I've got a 1-inch birch dowel to use for the handle. I also have a set of plans that's going to help me through step by step on completing this project. So let's begin. First, I'm going to use the table saw to rip my final width of 7 1/4. I set my rip fence to 7 1/4. I'm going to double check my blade height. Then I'll go ahead and safely make this cut. I'm going to cross-cut my boards to their final length. This could be done on the table saw, miter saw, or upcut saw. Using the upcut saw, I'll type in 20 to set my measurement stop. I'll load my material in. I've created a tracing form to help get the profiles for this project. So I'm just going to match those up side to side and top to bottom. This hole is not part of the profile. That's just to help hang it on the wall. So I'll have to set that center point with a ruler. My next step is to use a router table to route a groove into the bottom of each of my sides. I've set the router bit with a fence that's 3/4 inch away from the bit. It's a 7 millimeter straight bit, and it's 1/4 of an inch above the table. I'm going to use a push block for this, like so. I want to get a very consistent depth, so I'm focused on keeping it all the way pushed down as I run it over the router. So I've routed a groove near the bottom of these pieces. I'm here at the drill press, and I have made a center mark where I want my hole to be. I measured halfway across the top and 1.5 inches down and made my mark. I have checked all my setups to make sure that everything's going to be working correctly. I'm going to lay my piece down, and then using the tip of the drill bit, and I'm not turning it on, I am going to bring it down and just make sure that I'll be right on top of that dot that I've made. This is a multi-spur bit, and these type of bits need to allow the chips to come out as you cut. So you'll notice that I'm taking small bites until I get all the way through, and hopefully that will give me a clean hole on the bottom as well. You'll be able to feel once you get through, and if you've done it correctly, there should be minimal tear out on the other side. Before I drill my next hole, I'm going to make sure that the sawdust is cleaned off of the bit and that I've got a clean spot to drill my next hole. If I drill twice on top of the hole underneath, you're going to get more torn grain out the bottom. My next step is on the bandsaw. I'm going to cut close to, but not on, this line, and then I'll go to the sander to finish it off. If it's your first time using the bandsaw, then you don't have to get really close to the line. You can always do it in multiple cuts. So I'll show an example of getting really close to the line and another example of kind of working my way in. And either one is fine. Okay, on that example, I got as close to the line as I was comfortable. Over here, I'm going to show an example of kind of working my way towards that line. So it took me several more cuts, but I've achieved basically the same thing on this side. So whatever you're comfortable doing, it's fine. You want to not cut on that line, but if you do accidentally cut onto it, the project isn't ruined. Let's just keep moving. I'm going to finish my sides by cleaning up these profiles so that they look a little better. If you're doing an exterior curve, you can use the flat section of any of our power sanders. If you're doing an interior curve, then you'll need to use a round end which you could do here on the horizontal belt sander or on the spindle sander as well. You'll see it takes me multiple passes to do each of these curves. So don't force it. I'm going very lightly on the sander so that it doesn't throw my material. And I just allow it to just take its time and do multiple passes to get my shape. I've finished my sides, so now I can check that off of my procedure list. Next, I'll be building the front and back. I'm going to use the table saw to do both my cuts on these pieces. I'll first set my table saw to 14.5. Now take care, I'm trimming the longer end this time. So make sure that you don't accidentally make a wrong cut and then you won't have enough material. So my long side is 16 and I'm gonna be cutting it down to 14.5. I'm gonna use a push block for this as well. My next measurement will be 11.25. So I'll set my rip fence to that. Now, my sides that were previously 12 inches, that's what I'll be cutting down. I'm going to use a tracing form again, just to get this curve at the bottom. So I'll line it up on the sides and on the top and bottom. Use a pencil. I'm back at the routing table, and it's the exact same setup that I previously had. This time, I'm going to put the groove on the bottom near the line that we just traced. And I've created my groove all the way near the bottom. I'm here now at the dado saw, and I'm going to be cutting a rabbet into each corner side of these pieces. Be certain that you're cutting your rabbets on the same side that you cut your groove. I've set my setup here so that the teeth are 1/4 inch high. That's our depth of cut. And then I've brought the fence over so we're only exposing 1/2 inch because that's the thickness of the plywood. So this is my groove, so I'll make sure to put that end down first. Then I'll run this carefully, just like a rip cut. I'm going to put my push block near the edge, but I still want to see the fence so that I can tell that my material is tight to the fence. So right about there, and then I'm just going to have both hands on the push block. I'm going to rotate it around and do the same cut. Groove side down. So you can see here, I've cut a rabbet into each of these sides, the same side as the groove, and that's going to be the joinery for my box. Next, on the bandsaw, I'm going to cut close to, but not on my traced line. I'm going to finish off these curves on the horizontal belt sander to make them look nice. I've completed my front and back, and my next step is the bottom. I'm going to use my table saw for both of these cuts. The first one is I want to trim it from 16 inches down to a final length of 14. Because this is not super long, I'm going to use a miter gauge to give me some additional support. Now I'm going to cut the width from 8 inches down to 7 1/4. I've cut my bottom to size, and my next step is the handle. I've purchased some 1-inch dowel that can be used for several lengths of handle. So you could turn this on the lathe and create your own dowel, which would be fun. But in the interest of time, I'm just using a pre-bought 1-inch dowel. We need to cut a 14.5-inch handle. So I'm going to type in 14.5, go, set my measurement stop. I could get a couple more handles out of this dowel. So if I'm working with a neighbor or a friend, then we can all get ours from that one piece. If not, I'll return this to the supplies area so that someone else can use it. Now that I've completed all my parts, the next step is to assemble my caddy. Before I add glue, I'm just going to check and make sure everything fits correctly. And if there's any imperfections, then I want to deal with those before I glue up. It's easiest if you have a couple of these quick grip clamps so that you can have extra help getting that box put together. I'll start with one of my front back pieces and have it laid down on the table in front of me. And I'll insert my bottom into that groove. From there, I'm going to bring the sides into place. As I bring those together, I'm looking here at the bottom. And if this corner is nice and tight, then I'm okay. If there is any space left over, then that means my bottom is too long and it's not allowing my sides to come all the way together where they need to be. These look nice and tight. When you check yours, you can always call me over to give a second opinion as well. Now, I'll place the front on. Now I'm checking to make sure that this can come all the way down and that there's no gaps there in my joint. I actually have just a little bit of a space on that one. So what that means is that my bottom piece is just slightly too wide. And even though I tried to cut all my materials perfectly, I want to match this bottom to what I've created. So I'm going to go to the table saw and cut just a little bit off of the width. My previous width was 7 1/4. So I'm just going to move the rip fence over just a hair, about a 32nd of an inch. And as I run this through, there won't even be an offcut. It'll just buzz off a little bit of material. Let's go see if that fits. Okay, I will reassemble my box. And now those joints are looking nice and tight. You want to be confident that everything fits correctly before you start adding glue. Before you start adding glue, you want to have gathered everything you need. You need a glue bottle. I've put a piece of paper down so that I don't get drips on my workbench. And I also am going to be using an 18 gauge nailer. For this part, I'm going to use 3/4 inch nails. So I'm going to insert those as far forward as possible. And those nails are going to help to hold the glue in place and hold the pieces in place. And I'm going to be shooting it through this plywood and into the plywood on the side. It's hard for me to hold these all tightly together, so clamps help with that. I'm going to take one clamp here and just give a slight amount of pressure just so the box doesn't fall apart. Then I'll remove the front. I'm going to run a small bead of glue on the edges of each of these sides. I don't need to add glue onto the bottom because it's going to be held in place with those grooves. Now I'll put the face back on. Press it all the way down. You could also use a mallet if needed. And you want to make sure that your joints are flush. Okay, so this clamp is doing a good job holding down this area, but my sides sometimes can stick out up here. So I'm going to bring over a second clamp and use that up here to help pull those joints in as well. So along this whole thing, those joints are nice and tight together. If you're not confident in using a nailer, what you can do is measure and make a mark 1/4 of an inch in from the edge and draw yourself a light line, and that shows you where you should be shooting those nails. If you get too close to the edge, then the nails will stick out. If you get too far in, then those nails will stick in and you'll see them from the inside of the box. You want those nails to shoot through your front and about halfway into those sides. On these nailers, they happen to have a little line right here that shows you where that nail is going to come out. If you've traced your line, then you can match up the line on the nailer to your traced line. Make sure that you're not side to side or front to back at all, just totally up and down. Okay, finger off the trigger until you get it into place. Then you can shoot your nail. For this project, I would suggest having a nail near the bottom, near the top, and then maybe 2 more nails equidistant. I'm going to do the same thing over on this side as well. Now that those nails are in there, it's going to hold that together as that glue dries. So I'm okay to now flip my project over and do the same thing. My last step is to attach the handle. I'll slide that into place. Now my handle feels like it's a little bit short, but I think that these sides are actually just sticking out a little bit. So what I can do is take a clamp and put it near and just squeeze just enough until I feel that that dowel is flush. My 3/4 inch nails are now too short for this part, so I'm going to remove those. I'm still using an 18 gauge nailer, but I'm going to get some longer nails that will shoot all the way into that handle. Be sure that you insert them correctly all the way to the front. On this part, I am going to just place my nailer kind of anywhere in this area, but I want to imagine and make sure that I am shooting that nail through that handle. Since the nail is so long, if I'm a little bit off, I'll definitely see it sticking out. So be certain that you're going straight through to where that handle will be. If your project starts to tip, just set a hand to steady it up here and work with your other hand. We're gonna run one more nail just through the tops. I've purposely shot this through so that we could see it. So there's an example of what can happen. It's not the end of the world. We can try to fix that by either pulling it out with some pliers or possibly cutting it as well. I'm gonna bend that nail up just a bit and use some cutters. Cut off as much of it as I can. And then I don't want that sharp sticking out. So I'm just gonna flatten it a little bit with a hammer. On the other side as well, we'll stick it up just a bit. Trim that. And hammer it into place. It's worth being careful to shoot your nails right where you want them to, but as you could see, if you do get a nail sticking through, usually we can fix it. It's not the end of the world. So now my box is fully assembled. The last thing that I'll do is I want to take some sandpaper and make sure that all these edges and corners are sanded. I could use a palm sander lightly on the face. You don't want to sand through that veneer, but basically, we're just going around and making sure everything looks and feels exactly how we want it, like it's all done. Once I have done my finish sanding, then I'm going to apply some finish. For this project, I think I'll spray it with lacquer, but you could use any type of finish that you want, including paint. Now that my storage caddy is done, I'm ready to start on my Kubb game so I can store that inside.